Namaskar. Friends, welcome to the discourse number 77. In this discourse, the speaker would like to throw light on what Dharma is and relate it to yoga. So, this discourse is titled as Yoga and Dharma. Dharma is a very powerful and complex Sanskrit word. It's difficult to be translated into English, but the nearest and the most acceptable translated word in English is righteousness. But righteousness cannot be taken as dharma. So the word dharma has to be understood in its own sense, and it has several complications and implications. Let me make you understand this most complex word dharma and relate it to yoga. Now, dharma can be understood at two levels. One is at the highest level. It stands for truth, satya. That is one of the aspects of the ultimate reality, the final reality. At the lower level, the word dharma is understood as nothing but discharging one's own duties in a responsible way without expecting anything in return, without craving for any kind of fame, recognition, or popularity, cheap popularity. So that is not called dharma when you seek something in return. Primarily and fundamentally, it is nothing but discharging your own responsibilities, your own duties that are assigned to you. As for instance, take this, if you are a teacher, your primary duty is to deliver the goods in the classroom. Your fundamental duty is to teach the students, impart the knowledge. And a classroom comprises students drawn from various social strata. And all of them are not receptive equally. Some are found to be intelligent and highly receptive. They are quick in understanding the subject. And there are some students who are medium rate. And there are some average students and below average students. And this is what a classroom consists of. And the responsibility of a teacher is to not only deliver the goods to the intelligent students, but also to the other students of having lesser degree of receptivity. So therefore, he has to take all the students into consideration. For intelligent students, the teacher need not repeat twice or three times or four times the same subject, the same aspects or elements. But for average students, the teacher has to repeat. But even then, some students may not be very receptive. They are very dull and they cannot grasp the fundamental aspects of what the teacher is delivering. So therefore, the teacher has to give counseling to such students. He may have to um, take some extra classes. You may have to impart that knowledge, and you may have to see that the knowledge reaches every student in the class, and evaluate the student's performance in the examinations in a very judicious way, not showing any discrimination to a particular student or community of students, or the students belonging to a particular region, and so on. So you should be totally unbiased and impartial in evaluating the students' performance in the examinations. So these are its duties. And these are its responsibilities, for which the teacher is paid by the institution which engages its services. Just because the teacher is delivering the goods to the students drawn from various social strata, just because the teacher is engaging extra classes to pay attention to the dullers in the class, he or she need not be praised. That is his or her duty assigned as a teacher. So that is his dharma, that is her dharma. And if the teacher engages extra labor, or takes extra classes, because his primary object is to reach the knowledge to every student in the class, that every student has to understand the subject in a proper way. This is his object, and therefore, to fulfill this object, the teacher may be compelled to take some extra classes. And this is his duty, his responsibility as a teacher. As a teacher, he cannot ignore such students. He has to be very impartial. So therefore, he or she need not be overpraised for engaging certain extra classes. This is his or dharma. The primary responsibility of a teacher is to teach. The primary responsibility of a student is to learn, acquire knowledge without diverting the attention. Similarly, the primary responsibility of a doctor is to diagnose the disease, provide treatment to the patients. Sometimes the doctor may have to overwork. That is his dharma. Similarly, a policeman, his duty is to protect the citizens, maintain law and order in the society. Similarly, take any profession. Every profession has its own responsibilities, fundamental duties. As a mother, you have your own responsibility. As a father, you have your own responsibilities. As a wife, you have your own fundamental responsibility. So when you fulfill these duties and responsibilities assigned according to the profession, without expecting anything in return, then you are really leading a virtuous life. And that is yoga. See, what you need to understand here is that it's not merely discharging the responsibilities, but such responsibilities and duties have to be discharged without anticipating anything in return, without seeking some fame or recognition or cheap popularity or a cheap coverage in media and so on. And this is what Dharma is at the lower level. Let me enlighten you by bringing a story here taken from the Puranas. And the story is the story of the sage Kaushika. Kaushika left his parents in order to pursue the higher truth. So he was practicing everyday meditation. One day, after taking ablutions in a stream, sat under a tree and went into deep meditation. But there was a bird sitting on the branch of the same tree over his head and making a noise. And the sage felt he was disturbed by such noise made by the bird sitting on the branch of the same tree. So he opened his eyes in fury, and within seconds the bird was burnt as he saw it. And this Brahmin sage realized that he had acquired certain psychic power through his deep and intense meditation. So one day he went out for begging, and he reached a house in a village and stood outside and begged for alms. The lady of the house came out And seeing this Brahmin sage, she felt very happy because in those days giving alms to the Brahmin sages was considered sacred. And so the lady went inside to bring some alms for these Brahmin sage. But just then her husband had arrived, and so the wife immediately attended to her husband as he was tired. So after attending her husband, she came out with alms, but then the Brahmin became very angry, and he looked at her with the furious eyes. But then the lady was not burnt as the bird on the branch of the tree where he sat and meditated. So the power could not be exercised. And the lady was extraordinary, and immediately she made him realize what he had done to that bird. And the Brahman, who until then was very proud, realized his mistake and looked at this lady with great reverence and realized that this lady was not an ordinary lady, but she was a wise woman. And in turn, he sought her for some more wisdom to be poured on him. He wanted to learn some more from her because, and this was an eye-opening to him, as she told him that her primary responsibility as a wife was to serve her husband first, and then the guest. So she discharged her duties as a wife, attending her husband as he returned tired and weak. So there was nothing wrong. And this is what she told this Brahmin sage. And the sage was completely flabbergasted. It was an eye-opening for him. So in turn, he sought her help, her guidance. But then this woman asked him to go to a butcher in a city called Mithila, where he would be in a position to learn a great amount of wisdom from such butcher. So on her direction, he went to the city of Mithila and reached the shop where the butcher was cutting the meat and selling it to the customers. And he stood aside and looked at it intently. But then this Brahmin sage was so proud enough that he was not in a position to accept, to get any lesson of wisdom from this mean person, the butcher. But having reconciled in himself, he went to butcher and introduced himself and asked him to teach him wisdom as directed by the woman in the village. The butcher took him to his house. He had his wife and children and parents. It was a big family. And the butcher attended to his parents, attended to his wife and children, and then later he entertained this Brahmin sage with a sumptuous meal. And the, the Brahmin sage was in a daze. He could not believe that how a butcher could lead such a happy life, such a content life. And here the butcher taught the Brahmin sage what Dharma is. It is nothing to do with what you do, whether it is mean or noble. The question of considering a particular piece of work or a job as mean or noble is all your attitude of your mind. It is the mind that tells that this profession is mean, this profession is noble. This mind has categorized all such professions into mean and noble. But otherwise, every profession has its own significance, has its own importance. That as one takes up such a profession, one has to be sincere to it. One has to be very honest to it. One has to do justice to that profession by discharging the duties and responsibilities assigned by that profession. And this is what the butcher had done and of course was doing. Though the job that he was doing was mean in the eyes of this Brahmin sage, but he was discharging that duty, that profession, with a sense of responsibility, because he was gaining some livelihood from that profession. But he was very honest, very sincere, and truthful to that profession, cutting the meat and selling the meat to the public in a very honest way. So he was realizing the money with which he was leading his life. He was feeding his wife and children and his parents, of course. And therefore, there was nothing wrong. And this is what Dharma is. And the Brahmin sage was completely enlightened by this. So this is the story. So from this story, we understand that Dharma is nothing but discharging one's own responsibilities in a very sincere, honest, and truthful way. You need to commit yourself. You need to dedicate yourself to that job. Though you may not like the job, you may have come to the job accidentally. But then having taken up the job, you need to be very sincere, truthful to that job. Because that job is giving you some livelihood. And therefore you need to do some justice to that job. It's not merely that you should do job for the sake of getting some money, but discharging the responsibilities in a very sincere and truthful way. That is most important in Dharma. And the butcher was not anticipating or expecting anything from the public. That was his job. He was simply cutting the meat and selling the meat to the public, and the people were paying some money to him. And with that money, he was leading a very honorable and content life. Nothing else, nothing more than that. So he was very happy and he was very content with what he was doing. And that is what Dharma is. Dharma implies not merely discharging the responsibility, but also with a sense of contentment. You should feel that sense of contentment. That contentment to when you get from discharging such responsibilities and duties, then you are in a state of yoga. You are a yogi. Namaskar.